The Quad countries have kicked off the Malabar exercise, this time in Australia. How will China react to this show of unity? In West Africa, war is looming. ECOWAS countries have activated their standby forces. Could they launch an attack on Niger? We'll tell you why this decision is important. And space tourism is taking off. Virgin Galactic launched its second commercial flight yesterday. How are millionaire space tourists affecting the rest of us on Earth? We'll discuss all this and more. The headlines first. Zelensky fires heads of military enlistment in all Ukrainian regions. Citing corruption allegation, he says the charges could amount to treason. Kiev has been clamping down on graft as part of reforms asked for by the West. At least 20 Syrian soldiers killed in a deadly attack. Gunmen ambush a bus carrying the soldiers in the country's east. The ISIS was reportedly behind Thursday night's attack. These attacks by ISIS sleeper cells continue despite the terror outfit being defeated in Syria in 2019. India will scrap the controversial sedition law. Union Home Minister Amit Shah has made the announcement in Parliament. The Modi government is overhauling India's colonial-era criminal laws. They also plan to introduce capital punishment in mob lynching cases. Global demand for oil soars. In June, it hit a record high of 103 million barrels per day. The International Energy Agency says it will go even higher in August. China accounts for 70% of the growth. The surge in demand for oil threatens to push prices up further. Russia launches its first probe to the moon in almost 50 years. The mission aims to boost its long-struggling space sector. Sanctions against Russia over its Ukraine invasion have also impacted the sector. The Luna 25 probe is Moscow's first lunar mission since 1976. And will India get a web browser of its own? The government has launched a contest to build a homegrown web browser. Cash prize of over $400,000 announced for developers. The browser must comply with Indian regulations on data sovereignty. Poland is preparing for the worst. They have deployed 10,000 soldiers to the border. This one with Belarus. There has been talk of the Ukraine war spilling over, of other countries being dragged in. Looks like Poland is not taking any chances. 10,000 soldiers is a lot. It is not a half measure. It is a strong signal of intent. But what are these deployments aimed at? 4,000 soldiers will support the border guard, basically man the fences. The remaining 6,000 will be held in reserve. They will be called into action if necessary. Poland says the idea is to scare away the aggressor. Listen in.
We have to be ready for any scenario on the Poland-Belarus border. We do not exclude any, and that is why we decided to move the army closer to the border with Belarus to strengthen the border, to scare away the aggressor. That's what we mean, to scare away the aggressor so that the aggressor does not dare to attack Poland.
So how serious is this threat? Talk of a war spilling over began in the month of July. That's when Wagner mercenaries began settling in Belarus. Poland says it's all a ruse, that Wagner could use Belarus as a staging ground to attack them. How has Belarus responded? Well, their president Lukashenko did joke about Wagner going to Poland, but officially they have rejected such claims. There is a history of bad blood between these two countries, Poland and Belarus. And the border is a key part of it. It is around 400 kilometers long. Poland says Belarus is weaponizing this border. How is that? By waging a hybrid war. Warsaw has accused Belarus of pushing illegal migrants into their country. Around 19,000 people tried to cross the border this year. 16,000 people tried the same last year. In July, Poland's Prime Minister floated a theory. He said Wagner fighters could pose as migrants and enter their country, which is certainly possible, but so far there is no evidence that it's happening. The only escalation came on August the 1st. Poland accused two Belarusian helicopters of entering their territory. Reports say they flew 2 kilometers into Poland. Again, no evidence. Belarus has dismissed the claim as a lie. So what exactly is happening here? Could Belarus actually be plotting an attack? If they are, they must have Russia's support. After all, Poland is a NATO ally. Belarus would not risk attacking them without Putin's green signal. Even then, it is unlikely. Russia is not making much progress in Ukraine, so why open a second front to the north? And that too against a NATO country. There are two theories that could explain this escalation, this war of words. Number one, Russia and Belarus are testing NATO. Maybe they're trying to gauge the alliance's defense, hence the Wagner threat and the minor chopper incursion. And number two, Poland is making a big deal out of nothing. They have elections in October this year. Inflation is in double digits, was rather in double digits last month. So maybe this is all a populist stunt, an attempt to rally the voters behind a security threat. The fact is we can't be sure. And Poland is not the only country talking about hybrid warfare. Latvia is doing the same. They have beefed up security along the border with Belarus. Their president visited the region this week. He asked NATO and Europe to take hybrid warfare seriously. Listen to this now.
Our friends and allies in NATO and the European Union need to understand that in hybrid warfare, the least possible scenario could be the kind of classic military operations. I think hybrid operations are the most likely scenarios that we have to count on.
The situation is tense right now. Belarus is conducting a military drill near its border with Poland. On the other side, there are more than 10,000 Polish soldiers. So the risk is obvious. Even Russia is planning new deployments. The defense minister talked about quote-unquote new threats near the western border. He says an adequate response will be given.
Threats to Russia's military security require a timely and adequate response. We will discuss the necessary measures to neutralize them at the meeting and make appropriate decisions.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the war is escalating. Russia has increased attacks in the northeast. So Kiev has ordered an evacuation. People from 37 settlements have been asked to leave. It is not a choice. It is a mandatory evacuation. Another flashpoint is Zaporizhia. Take a look at these pictures from there. Dozens of buildings have been razed to the ground. Those standing are deserted. It's like a ghost town of destroyed buildings. But Kiev is not giving up. They could soon have a new weapons package. Joe Biden has asked the U.S. Congress for more money. How much more money? Around $24 billion. The U.S. has already given aid worth $113 billion since the war began. $113 billion already given. It could soon be $137 billion. So that's where things stand. Fears of a spillover, large-scale evacuations, and more multi-billion-dollar weapons packages. It's like nothing has changed since February 2022. So Europe is keeping its guard up. Asia, too, is strengthening its defenses against a common foe, and that is China. Navies of Quad nations started a drill today. It's called the Malabar exercise. In the past, India has hosted this exercise. They used to happen in the Indian Ocean. But this year, there is a different host, and that host is Australia. The drills are happening off the coast of Sydney. All 4 Quad members are represented here. Australia, India, Japan, and the United States of America. All 4 of them are present. For the next 10 days, they'll engage in high-end warfare training. Submarines and aircrafts are involved. What is the purpose of these drills? The hosts say they'll improve interoperability.
Exercise Malabar reinforces our shared commitment to working together as partners in our region to ensure that we maintain a stable, prosperous and resilient region for us all to enjoy.
None of the Quad members name China, but that's how the Quad operates. The official line is that the alliance is not against anyone and that the engagements are driven by mutual interests. But Beijing doesn't see it that way. They routinely criticize the Quad, even call it the Asian NATO. Don't expect a different reaction to this drill. The Malabar exercise is growing in size, scope and complexity. It started some 30 years ago. In 1992, it was just a bilateral exercise between India and the United States. In 1998, there was a brief pause. That's when America sanctioned India for its nuclear tests. The drills resumed in the year 2001 after the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center in the US. 6 years later, in 2007, we witnessed Australia's entry. But Canberra withdrew a year later. This was after China's relentless opposition. The next few years were stagnant. But in the last 8 years, we've seen significant expansion. First, with Japan's entry in 2015, and then with Australia's return in 2020. Malabar is now a quadrilateral exercise. The expansion widened the scope of drills. They've moved beyond the Indian Ocean. So far, this exercise has been held in the Philippine Sea, in the East China Sea, and this year in the Pacific. The hosting duties rotate every year. Last year, Japan hosted the Quad Summit, so they took care of the Malabar exercise too. This year's summit was supposed to happen in Australia, but Joe Biden called it off at the last minute. So the summit was called off, but the Quad leaders met in Japan on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Now, the Malabar exercise is happening in Australia as per schedule. Its scope will continue to broaden. The Indo-Pacific is getting more attention. There is expanding military coordination. The Quad might still avoid calling out China directly, but it's no longer hesitant in holding drills where the PLA wants a foothold. The Malabar exercise will help in boosting regional security. The drills in Australia follow the events of March. That's when the leaders of AUKUS met. AUKUS, as you know, stands for Australia, the UK and the US. It's a defence partnership. They came together for a submarine deal. The US and the UK will provide Australia with nuclear subs. But just like the Malabar exercise, the AUKUS too is expanding in its scope. Earlier this year, they announced a new initiative, a new trilateral submarine posture. The US and the UK will send their submarines to Australia, and these will be rotational deployments. They'll start from 2027. Where will they be stationed? On Australia's west coast, which faces the Indian Ocean. Diplomatic efforts are also gaining ground. American diplomats are returning to the Maldives, for instance. The US has decided to reopen its embassy there. It was closed in 2008. Earlier, the American mission in Colombo managed the workload. Now there will be a separate mission with a dedicated ambassador. Another Quad partner is also stepping up, and that's Japan. Recently, Japan's foreign minister was in India. He made stops in India, Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Again, the Indo-Pacific was on his agenda. So how should New Delhi see these developments? If you connect all the dots, you'll see a big positive. The allies are coming closer. They're creating new synergies. India is already making a wider outreach to the Pacific. 2 Indian warships are taking part in the Malabar exercise. Before they reached Australia, they made a port call in Papua New Guinea. We have discussed this in the past as well, the need for an effective deterrence against China. It might finally be shaping up. So countries are racing to contain China, and a new one has joined that list. I'm talking about New Zealand. They're heading to polls on the 14th of October, and for the first time, the electoral spotlight is on foreign policy in New Zealand. Parties are wrestling with how to respond to an assertive China. And now, an intelligence report has accused Beijing of foreign interference. New Zealand has long depended on its geographical isolation. It was seen as a security guarantee, but that's no longer the case. Auckland knows it needs to counter China. And now it's looking at new ways to do that. Our next report tells you more.
The world is a grand geopolitical chessboard where world powers jostle for dominance. But nestled far away in New Zealand, a masterclass in geographical isolation. For long, New Zealand thought its remoteness was enough. It was enough to protect it from anything. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. As tensions rise in the Pacific, especially with the belligerent China, New Zealand can no longer depend on its remoteness. An intelligence report says just that. It has accused China of foreign interference. It says, and I quote, "There were foreign intelligence agencies who persistently and opportunistically conducted espionage operations against New Zealand." The report calls for greater awareness. With the general election on October 14th, there is no clear path on how the country should respond. External issues are uncommon in New Zealand politics. But this time, the spotlight is on foreign and defence policy. Surveys show public concern around security. 40% of respondents saw China's rise as one of the greatest threats to New Zealand's safety. So, parties are grappling with how to deal with China. New Zealand has long been friendly with Beijing. Last month, the New Zealand Prime Minister was in China. The week-long visit was aimed at boosting exports. New Zealand's dairy and meat export economy is very reliant on Beijing. While the West may rally against China, New Zealand has historically taken a conciliatory approach. Last year, it even upgraded its free trade pact with Beijing. But China's muscular presence in the Pacific has raised a few eyebrows in New Zealand. So has its decision to sign a security pact with the Solomon Islands. This is a move that drew sharp rebuke from New Zealand. So now, Wellington must decide how to approach defense spending, its relationship with the United States and China, and the AUKUS partnership. Currently, New Zealand's defense budget is about 1% of GDP. The governing Labour Party says spending must increase, but it hasn't said by how much. Its involvement in a second tier of the AUKUS is also unclear. The AUKUS partnership involves the UK, the US and Australia. They're collaborating on nuclear-powered submarines. New Zealand's Defence Review says it presented an opportunity, but it does not want to compromise its anti-nuclear position. New Zealand goes to polls on October 14th. Chances are that the Labour will lose and the opposition National Party will win. So what's their China policy? The National Party has highlighted the importance of ties with China, no matter how contentious they may be. As for defence policy, they say they need more details on AUKUS. New Zealand manages its China relationship very carefully. On one side is its security partnerships in the West, and on the other, its economic dependence on China. So it's unlikely that New Zealand will get caught in a West versus China rivalry. But its balancing act is getting harder to maintain.
Vantage continues after a short break.
होकर युगों युगों के लिए जो युवा देश के लिए काम करेंगे वो सब के लिए महान क्रांतिकारी खुदीराम बोस जी का जीवन प्रेरणा के स्रोत हमेशा के लिए रहेगा, इसका मुझे विश्वास है। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, आज का ऐतिहासिक दिवस है। आज के ही दिन दादरा नगर हवेली का भारतीय संघ में विलय हुआ था और भारतीय संघ एक प्रकार से संपूर्ण राष्ट्र बना था। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, आज जब मैं ये 3 विधेयक लेकर आया हूं, उस वक्त आज़ादी के अमृत महोत्सव का समापन हो रहा है और आज़ादी के अमृत काल की शुरुआत होने का समय है। 15 अगस्त से आज़ादी का अमृत महोत्सव समाप्त होगा और 16 अगस्त से आज़ादी की 75 साल से 100 साल की यात्रा की शुरुआत होगी, जो निश्चित रूप से महान भारत की रचना करेगी। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने इस देश के सामने
So China is losing friends, it is also losing money. Deng Xiaoping had once said, "To get rich is glorious." China enjoyed its riches for a few decades, but now it is seeing the other side. China's economy is getting weaker. Even Joe Biden is not pulling his punches. He says China is a ticking time bomb. When bad folks have problems, they do bad things. That's what the U.S. president said yesterday during a fundraiser. For a change, Biden is right. China does face serious problems, and they're compounding every day. Today we saw more signs of trouble. One of China's biggest property developers is in trouble. This company is called Country Garden. It has reported a massive loss. How much? $7.6 billion. This is for the first 6 months of 2023. The year is not over yet, so this number could get bigger when the year ends. How big is Country Garden? It is a major player in real estate, but not as big as Evergrande. Nonetheless, its debt pile is scary. Country Garden, as Biden put it, is a ticking time bomb. It owes some $199 billion. This was by the end of 2022. So far, the company was making its payments on time, but this week, the creditors started to complain. Some payments were due this week. Last we checked, they haven't been made yet. The clock is ticking. Country Garden has a 30-day grace period. It started on Monday. If the payments are not made in a month, there would be a default. Will Country Garden be able to honor its debts? The signs are not looking good. The developer is bleeding money and the debt level is high. A default would be the worst possible outcome. Experts are comparing the situation to Evergrande. It was China's largest developer. Evergrande owes some $300 billion. Its collapse started a crisis in China's property sector. A default at Country Garden could weaken it further. This company has 4 times as many projects as Evergrande. So a default will have ripple effects. China's economy depends on the property sector. It's an important source of growth. It contributes to 30% of the country's GDP. Sales have failed to recover. In July, they dropped by more than 33%. The last thing China needs is another default. But like we've told you before, debt is a big issue in China, and Beijing is grappling with it on multiple levels. A default in real estate would be a disaster, but a default by the government would be a catastrophe. China's local governments are also struggling with debt. They've borrowed heavily, and they're unable to keep up with the payments. This is similar to the crisis in real estate, only the scale is much bigger. When local governments were on a borrowing spree, Beijing looked the other way. A lot of loans were off the books. They were not recorded until the crisis got too big to ignore and too difficult for provinces to manage at their level. So how much is this debt? Well, there is no official number because remember they're off the books. Since most of these loans were not recorded, we only have an estimate. And this is an estimate from Goldman Sachs. They say the total liabilities stand at $13 trillion, $13 trillion. Beijing is finally making an intervention. They have dispatched teams of financial experts. They're going to more than 10 provinces, those that are the weakest financially. What will these experts do there? They'll scrutinize the books, assess the liabilities, and then find ways to cut debt. What kind of solutions are they planning? They will want to raise more debt, apparently. We got a new report today. Apparently, debts at the grassroots will be transferred to the provinces. Loans worth $139 billion will be shifted. And how will that happen? Well, the provinces will raise money, they will issue bonds, and use that money to pay off debts at the local level. They've even given a name to this idea. It is called the Refinancing Bonds Program. Under this program, every region has been given a quota. This is basically a borrowing limit, a quota. It might sound like a bailout, since officials at the provincial level are effectively buying out debts at the grassroots. But don't be fooled by the jargon. China is just playing games with bookkeeping. Raising more debt to pay off existing loans does not solve the problem. It is just financial sleight of hand. Ultimately, someone has to pay off these loans. Where will China get the money from? Considering the present situation, China does not have many avenues to turn to. The threat of war looms over Niger. Leaders of West Africa held a crucial meeting on Thursday. Their big decision was this. The ECOWAS standby force will be activated. It's like their peacekeeping army. Now, the ECOWAS is a regional bloc in West Africa. It has 15 members, and it has been asking the coup leaders to step down. It's been asking them to reinstate the ousted president of Niger, and the leaders had set a deadline for last weekend. Step down or face military action, that's what they said. The deadline expired, but nothing happened. So this time they're sending a stronger message. They have activated their standby force. Listen to the ECOWAS president.
As you will see from the communique of this extraordinary summit, that no option is taken off the table, including the use of force as a last resort.
Direct the Committee of the Chief of Defense Staff to activate the ECOWAS standby force with all its elements immediately. Order the deployment of the ECOWAS standby force to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger.
It is a strong statement, but it's also a confusing one. ECOWAS is saying that force is the last resort. At the same time, they've decided to activate and deploy standby forces. You can see how it's confusing. Does activation mean mobilization? If yes, then what does deployment mean? And just to be clear, ECOWAS does have a history of military interventions. In 1990, they deployed soldiers to Liberia. The objective was to end a civil war. In 1997, they intervened in Sierra Leone. The West African troops drove out the military junta there. They reinstated the ousted president. In 2003, they deployed troops to the Ivory Coast. A military rebellion had cut the country into two, so ECOWAS got involved. In 2013, they sent soldiers to Mali. The mission was to retake the northern parts controlled by Islamists. So interventions are not new for them. ECOWAS has done it before. Why are they hesitating this time though? Because the bloc is divided. There are military regimes in Mali and Burkina Faso too. They support the junta in Niger. Plus the economic situation is bad. There is already a food crisis in Western Africa. The last thing they need is another war. Having said that, such flip-flops will affect the credibility of ECOWAS. First, they set a deadline for military intervention. That expired. Then they talked about prioritizing diplomacy. Again, failure. And now they have activated the standby force. Frankly, it looks like ECOWAS is running out of options. Where does that leave Niger? The coup leaders have refused to back down. They took power saying they can handle terrorism better. But now the argument has changed. The junta keeps accusing France of destabilizing the country. It's a popular narrative in Niger. It was a French colony in the last century, so blaming France is a popular strategy. But the question is, will it work? Recent examples will embolden the military. There was a military coup in Mali in 2021. The junta is still in power there. Last year, there was a coup in Burkina Faso. Again, the junta could not be removed. So diplomatic pressure has not worked in the past, and the military option appears too costly. The Niger junta is counting on that. They're using the same template as Mali and Burkina Faso. Hold your ground, blame France, and weather the storm. Meanwhile, the ousted president is in fact in more trouble. His name is Mohamed Bazoum. He's been under house arrest since the coup. Reports say the junta has cut food and water supplies to him. The U.S. has voiced concerns about his health.
We have deep concern for him, for his family, for his security and well-being. We've also made clear to the military leaders that we will hold them responsible for his safety and well-being.
Mohamed Bazoum was a Western ally. His ouster is a big setback to the United States and its partners. They needed Niger for stability in West Africa, for anti-terror operations, for development projects, and of course for resources. So with the junta, all of that goes out of the window. What is the West doing about it? They have put their weight behind ECOWAS. And what's crucial to note is this: the support is not conditional on a diplomatic settlement. It is a blanket support to the West African bloc. I guess that includes military intervention as well. Listen to Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
ECOWAS, the organization that brings together West African countries, is playing a lead role in making clear the imperative of the return to constitutional order, and we very much support ECOWAS's leadership and work on this.
The West would very much like to see the junta out, but within Niger, opinion is split. Military leaders have promised the people a lot: a crackdown on terrorism, end to French intervention, more prosperity. It's attractive in a country like Niger. Around 41% of their population lives in extreme poverty. It's fertile ground for coups. But the challenge before ECOWAS is this: if you let one coup slide, more will happen. Just look at the last 3 years. First Mali, then Burkina Faso, and now Niger. You cannot legitimize such power grabs by the military. If you do, you set a precedent. At the same time, it's important to understand why they happen. France's neo-colonial interventions certainly have not helped. All three countries I mentioned are former French colonies. Coincidence? I don't think so. Nowhere do people like military coups. So if they're splitting public opinion instead of galvanizing them, questions need to be asked. Speaking of public opinion, a Bollywood film is making a brave attempt to shape it. Some of you may have seen it. It's called Oh My God 2. It's a sequel of the critically acclaimed Oh My God, which released in the year 2012. The themes are different though. The first one challenged organized religion. The second one talks about sex education, or rather the lack of it. At this point, I must give you a spoiler alert. We will be talking a little bit about the movie's plot. If not, the story does not work. So this is what happens. A boy is kicked out of school. Why? Because he's caught masturbating. You can guess what happens next. The teachers, the principal, everyone blames the boy, as if he's committed some sort of crime. His family thinks the same until they get a reality check. And that reality check is Akshay Kumar's character. He's supposed to be a messenger of Lord Shiva. He convinces the father that the boy is not at fault. The society is. So the father decides to sue the school. The rest of the film is a courtroom drama. I will not tell you how it ends, but I will tell you this. The message is positive and timely. Every Indian teenager should see and absorb this message. Just one problem though, they can't. The film has an adult rating, meaning only people aged 18 and above can watch it. Sums up the problem really. The movie is about why teenagers should get sex education, yet teenagers themselves cannot watch it in India. I know it doesn't make sense. Countries like Oman and the UAE have given this movie a 12+ rating. So children above 12 can watch it in theatres. And these are countries rooted in conservative thought. They ban things for the smallest of reasons, yet Oh My God 2 got a 12+ rating there. I know we give Bollywood a lot of pain for their toxic characters, for their glorification of misogyny, and sometimes for not doing enough. You see, Bollywood is famous for its song and dance culture, not for movies with meaning. For once, it tries to do the opposite and this happens, an adult rating. India of all countries needs better sex education. Around 25% of our population is below 14 years of age. 27% is aged 10 to 24. But how many of them have access to sex education? It's almost non-existent at home. And what about schools? Surely the point of schools is to prepare students for everything. In India, private schools are free to choose. They may or may not include sex education. What about public schools? Well, a syllabus was introduced in the year 2005, but guess how state governments responded? 12 of them banned it. They said we won't teach sex education. Today, the ban remains in at least 5 states, the likes of Gujarat, Maharashtra and Karnataka. Why have they done so? Some politicians say sex education is against Indian culture. It's too vulgar and Western. I would ask those leaders to see this film. The movie explains how Indian culture has always had a mature and healthy approach to the subject. The Kama Sutra was written centuries ago. Temples like Khajuraho have erotic sculptures. The West did not make them. The British did not make them. We Indians did. So this conservative, narrow attitude towards sex education is not the Indian way. It's the Victorian way. And that's the point Oh My God 2 makes. It's actually an interesting way to tackle taboos. Challenging them outrightly can be dangerous. You may end up alienating a lot of people. So the film uses religion to justify change. Instead of proving what is right, you're showing what is wrong. It's complicated, but it works. It tells us why we need to have a nationwide conversation about sex education. In 2007, around 85% of young Indians had no access to it. 85%. This leads to multiple problems like unsafe sex, sexually transmitted diseases, sexual violence, child abuse. Around 45% of Indian women get married before the age of 24. 12% of them get married between 15 and 19. This is child marriage. Around 1/3 of these girls give birth before the age of 19. India has the second highest number of HIV cases in the world. 31% of those affected are between 15 and 29 years of age. So there is a problem. We need to acknowledge it and solve it. Talk about it to parents, to children, to students. In 2018, India's Prime Minister rolled out a new sex education syllabus. It was based on role play and activity. It was supposed to help 260 million teenagers. But you see, in India, education is not just the central government's job. The state can also decide on it. So you need both sides working together. If not, things won't change. I guess what we need is to broaden our outlook. Parents cannot shy away from uncomfortable conversations. If you don't talk to your child, they will resort to unreliable sources of information. As for the censor board, we need bolder decision-making, decisions also based in logic. You clear a movie with a Bhagavad Gita in a sex scene, yet you curb one that talks about sex education for teenagers. What gives? Such actions only prove the point this movie makes. Now let's shift our focus to space. Another company has begun trying to reach the stars and trying to make a fortune doing it. British billionaire Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic is open for business. It launched its second commercial space flight yesterday. 3 space tourists went to the edge of the atmosphere. They spent a few minutes hovering above the Earth. Then they came back to gush about their experiences. The space tourists included an 80-year-old former Olympian with Parkinson's disease and the first mother-daughter duo in space. Those two won a lottery for the spaceflight tickets. It sounds like a feel-good story, doesn't it? And we are happy about these unlikely tourists. But the flight should also have us worried. After Elon Musk's SpaceX and Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin, a third billionaire space tourism company is operational. And this industry brings with it a lot of risks for the rest of us. Here's a report.
Another space tourism company has launched, Virgin Galactic. Richard Branson's much-delayed space venture has finally taken off.
2, 1, release.
The company had its first commercial flight on June 29th. That one had scientists on board.
Welcome back to Space Unity.
But the second flight, the Galactic 02, took off yesterday, and it ferried out space tourists. One was 80-year-old former Olympian John Goodwin. He was Virgin Galactic's first paying customer. He bought the ticket 18 years ago, all the way back in 2005. He paid about $250,000 for his seat. Now, all these years later, he finally went to the edge of space. He's also the second person suffering from Parkinson's disease to go to space.
I'm hoping that I instill in other people around the world, as well as people with Parkinson's, that it doesn't stop you doing things that are out of the normal. If you've got something that's some illness that's inflicted you. So I just hope the good comes out of that as far as other Parkinson's people suffering.
2, 1, release.
With Goodwin were Kesha Shahaf and Anastasia Mayers, a mother-daughter duo, the first ever to go to space together. They're also the first people of African Caribbean heritage in space, so it was another milestone. The pair were lucky with their tickets. They didn't pay nearly as much as Goodwin. They won the tickets in a lottery.
Hi Anna, you and your mother are going to space.
Anna, we won! I'm still up there. I'm not here yet. I'm still up there, and it's just amazing that you can land so smoothly on the runway coming back from space. That was the most amazing. I mean, looking at Earth was the most amazing.
You are so much more connected to everything than you would expect to be. Like, you felt like a part of the team, a part of the ship, a part of the universe, a part of Earth. It was incredible, and I'm still starstruck.
She says she was starstruck. And who wouldn't be? She went to space, the final frontier. The mother-daughter pair were incredibly lucky to get a chance. But how many will get that lucky? How many of us will get a chance to blast off to space because of a lottery? Or will space tourism mostly be a millionaire's hobby? Goodwin paid $250,000 18 years ago for his chance. The first space tourist was Dennis Tito from the U.S. He went to the International Space Station in 2001 aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft. Back in those days, he paid $20 million for the experience. Between 2001 and 2009, there were 8 space tourists. All of them paid $20 million or more to go to space. And they were tagging along with astronauts on missions. So, back then, space tourism was a way to subsidize scientific endeavors. That isn't the case anymore. Today, you have 3 billionaires trying to carve out a niche in the space tourism industry. Elon Musk with SpaceX, Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin, and now Richard Branson with Virgin Galactic. They all have unique types of spacecraft, and the distances they reach are different. But they have one thing in common. Other than during publicity stunts, their passengers have to pay a lot.
Welcome to space.
The prices are usually hushed up, but one SpaceX tourism flight ended up costing the tourists $55 million each. Now you can say it's their money. They should be able to spend it the way they like. But should they be allowed to do it if it can hurt the rest of us? Which it can. Here's how. Research papers have shown that space tourism is a massively polluting industry. If we get constant reminders about how our car emissions are hurting the planet, think of what the rockets are doing. Even private jets don't compare to space tourism pollution. And the worst part is, the rockets can bring back a problem we're actually fixing, the ozone layer hole. These tourist rockets could undo the repairs to the ozone layer, once again showering those of us on the ground with harmful radiation. And for what? So that rich people can pay millions to float about in zero gravity? None of that money is coming to us. Whatever taxes a launchpad country charges, they won't get shared equally around the world. Only the consequences will. While we may be fine with taking risks for scientific study, are we willing to suffer for a millionaire's fantasy? So, until it's regulated and deemed safe for us down below, space tourism may need to be grounded before we all go up in smoke.
This has been a summer of ferocious weather in the US, with storms, floods and a devastating heat wave. We've told you all about it. But what's more shocking is how this weather has reached the country's most remote state. I'm talking about Hawaii. It began on Wednesday as a scattered brush fire on the Hawaiian island of Maui. These fires first burned in vegetation, but strong winds fanned them, and within a week, flames spread with alarming speed, blazing through populated areas, leaping across buildings, burning multiple neighborhoods to the ground. Look at these before and after visuals. Homes surrounded by blue waters and lush greenery were left charred, as if on a wasteland. The flames moved so rapidly, some residents jumped into the ocean to escape them.
It got really real when we saw the flames, and I had to think fast. We had to get out. We left our vehicle, and myself, my wife, and our 5 kids, we all got in the ocean. We found a floating board that we hung onto, and we think we were out there floating. And this is so surreal, and everything was burning around, explosions, cars blowing up, like embers was flying. We couldn't breathe.
Those who could escape the flames survived, but many were not so lucky. At least 55 people have died so far. The death toll is expected to rise because many people are still missing and thousands have been displaced. This is one of the island's most lethal wildfires. In all likelihood, also its largest ever natural disaster. The town of Lahaina suffered the most damage. This is a historic town in Maui. It was once the capital of the Hawaiian Royal Kingdom. Today it is home to 13,000 residents. Also what's described as the largest banyan in the US. But this once idyllic town was also consumed by fire, and its beloved tree was scorched.
We just had the worst disaster I've ever seen. All Lahaina is burnt to crisp. It's like an apocalypse.
Well, I actually drove through Lahaina today and it was to the ground, nothing. Like the whole town was gone.
People are very connected to nature in Hawaii. And that tree is like kind of emblematic of that. And the fact that it seems like potentially it's burned, I think it represents a bigger sentiment of loss.
As residents try to come to terms with the destruction, mass evacuation efforts are underway. U.S. President Joe Biden has approved federal aid for Maui.
Anyone who's lost a loved one, whose home has been damaged or destroyed, is going to get help immediately.
Hawaiian Governor Josh Green has offered some hope. He says it appears as if a bomb went off and recovery will take billions of dollars.
Right now, we're still in the assessment stage. We're still trying to assess the amount of damage, but the road to recovery will be long.
It may take years for Maui to rebuild what's been destroyed. After all, the fires were shocking. And don't get me wrong, they'd be devastating anywhere. But the fact that they happen in Hawaii is especially striking because this is a state known for its lush vegetation and beautiful oceans. It's a far cry from dry lands that are more prone to wildfires. Yet fire threats have been on the rise in the Hawaiian Islands. The area burned annually has quadrupled in recent decades. The rainfall is declining, temperatures are rising, and the islands have become vulnerable to blazes. Experts say this deadly wildfire is only a sign of the things to come. And the explanation is both somber and straightforward. Our planet is heating up, and no place is protected from disasters anymore. Our last story tonight is about the trifecta of stardom: celebrity endorsement. Think of it as a three-way relationship. It connects celebrities, products, and people, their fans. The internet has drawn all three even closer. Today, rappers are endorsing political candidates, models are recommending books, and apparently Kim Kardashian has become a medical influencer. She's a reality TV star. Recently, she took to Instagram to endorse an MRI body scan, a vastly overpriced one at that, with factual inaccuracies in her post. Obviously, she's now getting a lot of backlash over it. But this is not just about one tone-deaf post. It raises questions against all kinds of celebrity endorsements. They can and have gone seriously wrong. Our question tonight is, can stars act without responsibility? Here's a report.
Here's a question for you. When someone famous recommends a product, do you listen? Will you buy an outfit because the brand sponsors Olympian gymnast Simone Biles? Will you eat more Maggi if actor Madhuri Dixit tells you to? What about a high-tech MRI body scan? Will you get one because Kim Kardashian recommends it? As you probably know, Kim Kardashian is a reality TV star. Apparently, now she's also doubling up as a medical influencer. She took to Instagram to enlighten her followers about new medical technology. She shared an image of an MRI machine with a peppy caption, saying that it can detect diseases like aneurysms and that the machine doesn't use radiation. But she may have missed one thing. The body scan comes at a price, a heavy one. Each scan costs about $2,500 and it's typically not covered by insurance. It's an out-of-pocket measure for preventive cases. As you can imagine, this invited heavy backlash. People slammed her for promoting something so expensive during a cost of living crisis when people are struggling to afford food and basic Medicare. Others said she's disconnected from reality. But that isn't even the half of it. Kardashian's caption was also inaccurate because an aneurysm isn't a disease. And no MRI scan uses radiation. They create images of the body using magnets and radio waves. Maybe Kardashian had it confused with X-rays, which do use radiation. This shouldn't be shocking because Kardashian isn't a doctor. She's endorsing a brand and a medical scan she barely knows anything about. But Kardashian isn't the only one. In 2015, actors Madhuri Dixit, Preeti Zinta and Amitabh Bachchan landed in soup for claiming that fast food Maggi has nutritional value in an ad. They were sent legal notices. Speaking of legal action, actor Gwyneth Paltrow comes to mind. Her company Goop is believed to be at the epicenter for all things wellness. But in 2018, it was fined $145,000 for making unscientific claims about its yoni eggs. Celebrity endorsements can often be tone-deaf, and the Kardashians are no strangers to this. They've been slammed in the past. Once, Kim Kardashian advertised appetite-suppressant lollipops. In 2019, Khloe Kardashian promoted meal replacement shakes. Both were criticized for promoting disordered eating. And this isn't new. Back in the 1940s, film stars posed for cigarette companies. It was acceptable. Now, times have changed. There's more scrutiny. Kind of like Pepsi's 2017 ad with model Kendall Jenner, where she was accused of trivializing the Black Lives Matter movement. The ad was taken off air. But celebrities still get away with spreading misinformation. Are they really held accountable for what they say? Especially as they're overused in advertising. Worldwide, celebrities feature in 16% of all ads. The numbers are higher in Asian countries, with 27% in India and 55% in Japan. In some ways, this is good. Nothing sells like a celebrity. So it's beneficial not only for brands, but also for stars, for whom endorsement is a source of rich revenue. Studies say that when consumers believe that a famous person uses a product, sales take off, especially if you're Beyoncé. Her marketing power stands at 80 on a scale of 100. It's clear that celebrities have the power to shape minds and to influence people's choices. They should know better than to break the public's trust over Instagram likes. As the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility.
And now it's time for Vantage Shot's images that tell the story. Hundreds of hot air balloons took to the skies above the English city of Bristol. The city is holding its annual hot air balloon event, the largest in Europe. In a heartwarming viral video, penguins were seen carrying backpacks. 2 sea turtles were released into the Mediterranean Sea after rehab. And finally, what makes the 11th of August significant? Going back to the year 2003, when NATO took command of Kabul's peacekeeping force. This became the NATO's first operation outside Europe. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
we have a truly international city.
So from a historic state visit by Prime Minister Modi to the United States in June, and yet at the same time, these concerns and complaints from various US government and academic institutions about religious freedoms here in India, let's explore the whole gamut of Indo-US relations, and what a pertinent time and what a pertinent personality to discuss this with than Ro Khanna, who is a United States House of Representatives congressman representing the Democrat Party. He's now leading a congressional delegation here in India and will be watching the Prime Minister's Independence Day speech from the Red Fort. And I believe this will be the first time that a congressional delegation will be watching the Prime Minister's speech on Independence Day live at the venue, that's the Red Fort. So Congressman Ro Khanna is now joining me. Thank you very much, Congressman, for speaking with us. You're coming to India after a long time and for a very special occasion. You're in Mumbai, you'll be coming to Delhi. What are your thoughts at this juncture of the Indo-US ties? How would you see it?
Well, it's a wonderful feeling of pride, of such warmth, of hospitality. It is a historic delegation. We're so excited that we're going to be at the Red Fort with the Prime Minister celebrating India's independence. And for me, it has personal meaning, as my grandfather, as you know, was part of the freedom movement, in jail for many years. And to see that moment is wonderful.
I do want to talk to you about something which is a bit of a thorn in the relationship. While everything seems to be hunky-dory and everybody is praising the India-US relationship, it is the relationship for the future, no doubt. But there is the issue of minority rights and religious freedoms, etc. And you too had made a mention of it just a few days ago before leaving for this visit to India.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to everybody, and thank you so much for settling down. We're in the midst of a legend. आशा जी, मैं ये बता नहीं सकती कि कितनी गर्व की बात है हमारे लिए कि आज आप यहाँ पे हैं हमारे साथ इस मंच में. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Asha Bhosle. We can do better. A standing ovation is what a legend like her truly deserves. So, Asha ji, जो प्यार झलक रहा है यहाँ पे मैंने आपको पहले भी कहा था कि आज मैं इतने सारे लोगों से मिली हूँ और जितने भी लोगों ने मुझे बताया कि वो यहाँ आ रहे थे, सबने सबसे पहली बात यही की कि हम आ रहे हैं आशा जी को देखने के लिए. तो आपने देखा कि किस प्रकार का प्यार आपके लिए है. पर मैं शुरुआत करना चाहूंगी आपके जो सफर रहा है. आप 8th September को you're going to be 90, ladies and gentlemen. She's going to turn 90. What a fabulous journey it's been. और आपने हमेशा कहा है कि आप गाना नहीं चाहती थी, आप काम करना नहीं चाहती थी, आप फिल्में नहीं करना चाहती थी, लेकिन फिर भी आशा भोसले ने इतना कुछ कर दिया है, इतना करके भी आप अभी भी रिटायर नहीं हो रही है।
आप चाहती मैं रिटायर?
नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं चाहते कि आप रिटायर हो।
जब छोटी थी तब ये ठीक है,
थोड़ा सा कैन वी गेट द साउंड अप ऑन आशा जी's माइक प्लीज? हाँ जी बोलिए।
मैं जब छोटी थी गाना तो गाती थी, सीखती भी थी पिताजी से, लेकिन इतना ध्यान नहीं था, ना स्कूल में ध्यान था, ना कुछ किसी चीज में। खेल 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 चाहिए और खाना चाहिए। मलाई बहुत खाती थी मैं।
मलाई बहुत खाती थी, अभी खाती हैं कि नहीं?
खाती हूँ। मलाई खाती हूँ, दूध बहुत पिया है मैंने, और सब लोग बोलते हैं आजकल दूध नहीं पीना चाहिए, तो मैं तो पी चुकी हूँ। और इसीलिए मैं शायद यहाँ आज हूँ। मुझे लगता है वो मलाई जो है वो काम आई है मेरे। फिर उसके बाद पता नहीं हालात ऐसे हो गए कि मैं गाने लग गई। गाना नहीं चाहती थी, फिर भी गाने लग गई। पता नहीं नसीब क्या चीज है, कुछ पता नहीं, हमको नहीं पता होता। फिर मैं गाने लग गई, फिर गाती गई,
और आज तक गा रही हैं आप?
जी हाँ, आज तक गा रही हूँ। बीच में बहुत बार सोचा कि अभी छोड़ दूं, अभी बच्चे हो गए हैं तो छोड़ दूं, फिर नहीं, तकदीर ही ऐसा झटका मारती थी कि गाना ही पड़ता था। तो इतना नजदीक कैसे लूं मैं, मुंह में डालूं क्या? जरा आवाज बड़ी करिएगा।
कैन वी थोड़ा सा, अगर आप ऐसे पकड़े तो शायद बेटर रहेगा, अगर थोड़ा सा। कैन वी जस्ट इंक्रीज द ऑडियो प्लीज फॉर आशा जी's माइक एज मच एज पॉसिबल? हाँ जी
ठीक है। हाँ अभी ठीक,
बढ़िया।
तो फिर से गाने लग गई, फिर से गाने लग गई, और गाती रही हूँ और गाती रहूंगी।
गाती रही हैं और गाती रहेंगी। और आज जब हम बात कर रहे थे, आप अब दुबई जाएंगी, अपना जो 90th बर्थडे है वो आप सेलिब्रेट करेंगी एक शो के जरिए, और ये 3 घंटे का शो होगा, और आप गाने वाले ना ही सिर्फ अपने गाने, पर आपके जो फेवरेट सॉन्ग्स है जो आपने नहीं दर्शाए हैं, आपने नहीं गाए, वो भी आप गाएंगी। सो ट्रिब्यूट टू द स्टार्स, ट्रिब्यूट टू द परफॉर्मर्स ऑफ all of these years that you've been performing. तो ये आपने कैसे सोचा कि मैं अब तक परफॉर्म करूंगी और अपने 90th बर्थडे को इस तरह सेलिब्रेट करूंगी?
हर नामवर आदमी के पीछे कोई ना कोई होता है। जैसे लोग कहते हैं कि मेरी बीवी मेरा एक्सप्रेशन, क्या बोलते हैं, एक्सपायर जी एक्सप्रेशन देती है जी। हाँ, और वैसे मेरा बेटा है जो मेरा बैकबोन है, वो मुझे खड़ा रखता है। नहीं तो मैं कभी का मतलब वो हो जाती थी, नर्वस हो जाती है, कभी कुछ होते, वो होने नहीं देता है। और ये जो शो है वो उसी का बनाया हुआ है कि उसकी माँ, उसको मैं इतनी प्रिय हूँ कि उसने बोला 90th बर्थडे कोई गाता नहीं है इस उम्र में, और तुम गा रही हो अभी तक, तो मैं जोरदार शो करूंगा, लाइक ब्रॉडवे।
Like Broadway. Yeah. And that is the tribute that her son, who's here with us, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to him as well. Thank you so much for giving all of us an opportunity to basically see her in action, in live action once again. आशा जी, आपसे मैं ये पूछना चाहूंगी, मैंने आपका एक पुराना इंटरव्यू देखा था, ये 1991 की बात है, और 1991 में आपसे जब पूछा गया था कि आप कैसे देखती है अपने सफर को, और आपने कहा था मैं जैसे बिल्डिंग की 7वीं मंजिल होती है उस पे बैठ के देखती हूँ कि एक डिस्पैशनेट ऑब्जर्वर की तरह देखती हूँ कि मेरा किस प्रकार का सफर रहा है। आज 90 years ऑन आप किस प्रकार से अपने जर्नी और अपने सफर को देखती हैं?
असल में देखा जाए तो ये भी हो सकता है कि आदमी कुड़ जाए कि कितना मैंने दुख सहा है, कितना मैंने कुछ किया है, ये वो नहीं करके मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि वाह, इतना कुछ पार करके मैं आई हूं आज, इतना पार करके आई हूँ कि किसी औरत के लिए नारी शक्ति है, शिव है, शक्ति नहीं है तो शिव भी नहीं है, वो शव हो जाता है। तो शक्ति जो है वो हर औरत में है, हर औरत उसको पहचानती नहीं है। अगर वो अपनी शक्ति जान जाए तो वो बहुत काम कर सकती है। मैं आपको बताती हूँ कि मैं पढ़ी लिखी नहीं हूँ। इतने साल मैं सब मेरा कारोबार चला रही हूँ, मतलब बच्चे बड़े होने तक। कितना मुश्किल है कि एक औरत, अकेली औरत, 3 बच्चों को बड़ा करना, उनको स्कूल भेजना, उनके लिए खाना पकाना, उनके कपड़े देखना, उनको क्या संस्कार देने हैं, क्या नहीं करना है, ये सब देखते हुए फिर दिन रात काम करना है। रिकॉर्डिंग जाना है 10 बजे, रात के 2 बजे आना है। ऐसे मैंने लाइफ झेली है। फिर उसमें भी लोगों के, आपको जानती हैं, ताने वाने सुनना, उसको भी हंस के मजा लेके ताने सुनना करना, और जैसे इग्नोर करना दुनिया को, ऐसे इग्नोर किया मैंने और मैंने अपना काम करती गई।
आपने जो कहा है कि दुनिया वाले तो बोलते रहेंगे, दुनिया का काम है बोलना, लेकिन आपने इग्नोर किया और आपको जो करना था वो आपने किया। आपने शक्ति की बात की और कहा कि सब नारियों में ये शक्ति होती है, पहचानने की थोड़ी बहुत देरी लग जाती है। आपको कब पता चला? क्योंकि आपने कहा यू वर अ सिंगल मदर, आपने फाइनेंशियली अपना जो थे अपनी इंडिपेंडेंट थी काफी बिगनिंग से, तो आपने ये जो शक्ति थी, आपको कब ये महसूस हुआ कि मैं कुछ भी कर सकती हूँ?
काफी लेट हुआ, मतलब 19-20 साल में ये मुझे लगा कि मैं, जब मुझे मतलब अलग हो गई, कर दिया, फिर उसके बाद मैं अकेली खड़ी थी सड़क पे और मैं सोच रही थी मैं अब कहाँ जाऊँ, क्या करूँ। तो एक अपना गला ही अपने साथ है, तो फिर आगे काम चलाती रही और बच्चों को लेके कैसे मैंने क्या ज़मीन, कैसे फ्लैट लिया, क्या किया, काफ़ी लंबा मामला है, तो ये मैं छोड़ देती हूँ। लेकिन मैंने बच्चों को बहुत अच्छी तरीके से बड़ा किया, क्योंकि मैं काम करती थी उनके लिए। मुझे अगर कोई पूछे कि तुम किस लिए काम करती हो, तो मैं बोलती थी मुझे पैसा चाहिए, क्योंकि मुझे बच्चों को बड़ा करना है, सिर्फ गाने से खाना नहीं मिलता है, तो मुझे पैसा चाहिए था, क्योंकि पैसा बिल्कुल नहीं था मेरे पास। तो पैसे के लिए मैंने काम किया, जो काम मिला वो करती गई। इस बेटे के बाप ने मुझसे कहा था कि दाने फेंकते जाओ, कभी ना कभी पेड़ आएगा ही आएगा, कोई ना कोई पेड़ आएगा, ये उन्होंने कहा था। और एक बात कही थी कि अगर खाना नमक के बगैर हो तो नमक के बगैर खा लेना, लेकिन पड़ोस में जाके नमक नहीं मांगना। तो ये 2 चीजें मैंने संभाली। इन 2 चीजों से मैंने किसी के सामने कभी भी हाथ नहीं फैलाया, काम के लिए भी नहीं हाथ फैलाया, और काम करती गई। बस मैं बोलती थी कि पैसा मिले चाहे नहीं मिले, मैं गाऊंगी जरूर, कोई ना कोई पेड़ जरूर आएगा। तो ऐसा ही हुआ, कोई ना कोई अचंभे से गाना चल पड़ा और फिर आशा भोसले सबको पता हो गई।
One of the issues you will take up in your meetings with your counterparts in the various meetings that you have here in India. Could you lay out the map for us? What is it that you're worried about? What is it that are your concerns, and how does that square up with the reality on the ground? Because the reality seems to be very different.
Well, he was in the United States, and it was a very successful partnership between the United States and India. There is an increasing cooperation on defense. That's why we're here in Mumbai with the Western Naval Command, on technology, on the economy. There is a cultural cooperation. We're excited. We're going to be meeting Amitabh Bachchan and met Anupam Kher, so the popular culture with Hollywood and Bollywood. And of course, ultimately, it has to be rooted in the values of democracy, openness of the press, pluralism, minority rights. But I am very, very bullish on the United States-India partnership. Well, I have always been clear that India and the United States relationship has to be grounded on pluralism. It has to be grounded on minority rights. We have to condemn violence against any religious institutions, and we will continue to speak out for those values.
I do want to talk to you about a decision taken recently by the Biden administration, and that is to ban Chinese tech imports coming into the United States. And the U.S. and China have been going on this almost trade war-ish kind of situation when it comes to high-end electronics, when it comes to semiconductors. Could you explain the rationale behind that decision and what may be in it for India? Because India is hoping to be this +1, the China +1, when it comes to diversifying supply chains for companies around the world.
Well, we have to be prudent. I mean, we invented the semiconductor technology. We can't be giving the advanced design, the advanced tools to China that they could then use that technology to build their navy, to build their military. As it is, China has the leading amount of ships. And so those are prudent export controls to make sure our most sensitive technology doesn't get to China. But I'm very excited about the partnership between the United States and India's defense. We're doing joint military exercises at the Malabar. We're doing joint exercises with the Navy.
I also want to talk to you a little bit about, some of these protests that we are seeing by what we here in India call the Khalistani separatists or the Khalistani elements. We saw one in California, the state you come from, just outside the Indian consulate in San Francisco. These were violent protests. I want to know your thoughts on that.
Well, India is a sovereign country, and I recognize the sovereignty of India, and I will leave it at that.
I'm sorry I'm sort of pressing on that issue because India is viewing that issue as an attack on sovereignty, as a question mark on India's sovereignty. And I'm curious to know from you, as an elected representative in the U.S. House, what are your views on this kind of separatist ideology?
Well, there's no view in my thing for separatism. I mean, India is a sovereign country. It has been a sovereign country, and we have to recognize that sovereignty. And certainly the United States doesn't recognize any of the separatist movements.
All right, so you're going to be here in Delhi soon. You'll be there at the Red Fort listening to the Prime Minister on Independence Day. What else is your delegation going to be doing in your time here in India?
Well, we're meeting the head of the Western Naval Command. That's really important.
आशा जी, मैं आपसे ये जानना चाहूंगी कि जब हमने आपकी अभी फिल्म देखी और इतने सारे जो फिल्म स्टार्स हैं जिनकी आप आवाज बनी है, मधुबाला से लेके माधुरी दीक्षित तक, उर्मिला मातोंडकर से लेके जीनत अमान तक, और इतना बड़ा आपने जो सफर तय किया है, लेकिन आपकी एक जो डिस्टिंक्ट क्वालिटी रही है और काफी कंपैरिजन्स भी होते रहे होंगे आपके और लता जी के बीच में, लेकिन आपने एक कॉन्शियस डिसीजन किया था कि वो उनका स्टाइल है, आपका स्टाइल अपना होना चाहिए. तो ये आपने कैसे अपने जहन में ये तय किया था और उस स्टाइल को फिर कैसे होन करती गई? क्योंकि इतने सारे किरदारों के लिए आपने आवाज दी है, इतनी सारी महिलाओं के लिए आपने आवाज दी है, तो वो प्रोसेस कैसा होता है कि अब मैं जीनत अमान के लिए कैसा गाऊं, माधुरी दीक्षित के लिए कैसा गाऊं, मधुबाला के लिए कैसे गाऊं?
बचपन से हम बहनों की आवाज एक थी, तो मैं अगर उसके जैसा ही गाती तो मुझे कोई नहीं बुलाता. वो अगर बोलते कि जी लता है तो आशा का क्या काम है, आशा तो इतना अच्छा नहीं गाएगी लता जितना गाती, ऐसे तो लोगों में होता ही है. तो हमारे में कहावत है कि नकट व्हावं पण धाकट होऊ नये. मतलब नकटा होना अच्छा है लेकिन छोटा होना, बहन छोटी बहन जो होती है ना उसको हमेशा छोटा गिना जाता है. तो ये हमेशा से हुआ है. तो मैंने अपनी स्टाइल बदल दी, कहा कि दीदी जैसा नहीं गाना है, दीदी जैसा उसको नकल नहीं करनी. आज बहुत नकलें होती हैं उनकी, तब से लेके नकल हो रही हैं. तो नकल होती है, असल होता है. तो मैंने अपना असल बनाना चाहती थी. मैं आशा भोसले अपना नाम कायम करना चाहती थी. तो इसलिए मैंने अलग अलग देशों के गाने सुने, अलग अलग इंग्लिश बोलते, इटालियन, स्पेनिश, कोई भी मैंने ये संगीत छोड़ा नहीं। और मैंने सुनती गई और अपने आवाज़ को चेंज करती गई, अपनी भावनाओं को उनको देख के सोचती थी कि ये कैसे गा रही हैं, ये कैसे करना है। ऐसे करते करते फिल्मों में मैं वही करने लग गई और लोगों को कहा ये बहुत अच्छा स्टाइल है, ऐसा कोई गाता ही नहीं है। और ये बहुत अच्छी बात हुई कि मेरे स्टाइल का गाना कोई भी नहीं गा सकता था उस वक्त, तो मुझे अच्छा लगता था।
लोगों ने काफी ट्राई तो किया है, लेकिन
ट्राई तो सब करते हैं और उसमें कोई तकलीफ नहीं है। अगर कोई अच्छा कुछ करना चाहता है, अगर वो नकल भी करता है तो अच्छे के लिए करता है। मुझे इसमें कुछ नहीं है, मेरी जलने की आदत नहीं है। हाँ। कि ये ऐसा हुआ तो वो मुझे चाहिए, ऐसा वैसा, वो नहीं है। मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि जिसके नसीब में जो है उसको मिलेगा। मेरे नसीब में था, मुझे मिला कि नहीं, क्योंकि मेरे नसीब में था। मैंने मेहनत की, बहुत मेहनत की, मैंने बहुत दुख काटे हैं, लेकिन मिला मुझे। ऐसे सुंदर बच्चे मिले, ऐसे सुंदर पोता पोती वगैरह मिले हैं, सब अच्छा है। मुझे जलन नहीं किसी से। मैं खुद ही बोल रही हूँ, मैं बड़ी दिल की औरत हूँ कि मैं अगर चाहूँ तो मेरा प्रेशस चीज़ होगी ना, मुझे मालूम है कि इससे मेरा बहुत नाम होने वाला ये है, वो मैं उसको छोड़ के आ जाती हूँ। मैं इतनी बड़ी
ईगो नहीं है,
ईगो नहीं है, इसलिए मैं लोगों को बहुत पसंद हूँ। लोग मुझे गाने से ज्यादा पर्सन से पसंद करते हैं। आशा भोसले, मैं कैसी हूँ वैसे उनको पता है कि ये बहुत साफ बोलने वाली औरत है, ये सबसे मिलनसार है, सब है, वो उनको पसंद है। मैं इसलिए उनके घर की सदस्य बन गई हूँ। गाना सुनते हैं वो, गाने से मेरे को पहले जाना है, लेकिन बाद में घर का सदस्य बना लिया है।
बिल्कुल घर का सदस्य है। और आई थिंक यू आर द सबकॉन्शियस ऑफ द नेशन। अगर हमें प्यार हुआ किसी से तो आपका गाना मन में आता है, दुखी हुए तो आपका गाना मन में आता है। जो भी एक इमोशनल जो जर्नी होती है हमारे जहन में, आपके गाने तो जरूर याद आ जाते हैं। लेकिन आशा जी, मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाहूंगी, आज आपकी ग्रैंड डॉटर यहाँ पे है, शी इज ऑल्सो attempting to get into the music business and आप उनसे क्या कहती हैं जब आपकी कॉन्वर्सेशन होती है? वो कहती हैं कि उन्हें भी आपके जैसे बनना है और आपकी जैसे सफर करना है, तो आप उन्हें क्या कहती हैं?
वो मेरे से बहुत ज्यादा टैलेंटेड है।
आपसे ज्यादा टैलेंटेड है?
क्योंकि वो कथक डांस 5 साल से सीखी है, उम्र की 5 साल से। वो कथक में एकदम ठीक है, मॉडर्न डांस में भी अच्छी है, एक्टिंग भी करती है, गाना भी गाती है, तो मुझसे ज्यादा उसमें है।
बिल्कुल सुनेंगे, बिल्कुल सुनेंगे। I heard you. I'm walking up to her because this is your grandmother has said that you're as talented as her. So
आज तुझा आवाज चांगला नाही, गाणं गाऊ नकोस.
She's already giving you instructions on stage, is it? A tribute to your grandmother.
नमस्कार। तो ये गाना एक्चुअली मेरे ग्रैंड आंट लता जी का है और ये भी मेरे दिल के बहुत करीब है, क्योंकि इन दोनों से कोई कनेक्शन मिल जाता है फिर। अजीब दास्तां है, कहाँ शुरू कहाँ खत्म, ये मंजिलें है कौन सी, ना वो समझ सके ना हम, ना वो समझ सके ना हम। Thank you.
Thank you so much for being such a sport. आशा जी, पास हो गई?
अभी उसको तराशना है।
आप अभी भी रियाज करती हैं? रोज रियाज करती हैं?
जी बिल्कुल।
कितने घंटे करती हैं आप रियाज?
मैं जब मन में आए जब जैसे वक्त होता है ऐसे बैठ जाती हूँ। रात को 12 बजे भी बैठती हूँ और सुबह 7 बजे उठती हूँ, कभी 5 बजे उठती हूँ। मेरा ऐसा बंधन नहीं है कि मैं अभी सुबह ही करूँ या रात, कभी भी बैठती हूँ।
हाँ।
मेरे नौकर बहुत तंग आ गए मेरे से। जब देखो गाती रहती है,
जब देखो
ताने
गाती
मारती
रहती है। पर ये मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूंगी, आप एक थोड़ी रेबेलियस भी रही हैं, आप बहुत रही हैं, बहुत रेबेलियस रही हैं कि आपकी मम्मी ने कहा था कि बाल नहीं काटने चाहिए, लेकिन आप जब बचपन में आप खुद ही गई और बाल कटवा के वापस आ गई।
13 साल की थी।
13 साल की थी।
और नाना चौक में कोई उस वक्त, तो आज से कितने साल पहले, मतलब 44-45 की बात है, तब तो औरतों के लिए कोई दुकान होता ही नहीं था बाल काटने का, कुछ नहीं था ना, अभी जैसा है सैलून वालून। तो उस वक्त मैं बाजू में एक क्रिश्चियन आदमी का दुकान था, डेबेलो करके, उसके दुकान में सब आदमी लोग बैठे दाढ़ी वाड़ी कर रहे थे, तो मैं जाके अपने बाल कटवा के आ गई। माँ ने इतना मारा है मेरे को, बहुत मारा। मैंने कहा आ जाएंगे बाल, तू क्यों मारती है मेरे को।
और उस टाइम सभी लोग व्हाइट साड़ीज पहनती थी, लेकिन आपने डिसाइड किया था कि आप कलर पहनेंगी।
मुझे अच्छे लगते कलर, लाइट पिंक, बेबी ब्लू, जैसे स्काई होता है, ऐसे कलर बहुत अच्छे लगते हैं और मैं पहनती थी। लेकिन हमारे घर में सब दीदी वगैरह सब सफेद पहनते थे, बॉर्डर वाली साड़ी।
तो आशा भोसले इज अ कलरफुल पर्सनैलिटी।
जी।
और आपसे ये मैं पूछना चाहूंगी कि आपका जो आपके साथ जिन्होंने गाया है, 900 गाने गाए मोहम्मद रफी साहब ने आपके साथ, और आपके फेवरेट सिंगर रहे हैं। एक अगर कोई गाना हो जो आपके सफर को कैप्चर करता है, वो बताइए। जो आपका कोई फेवरेट गाना हो, या जिससे आप अभी भी इंस्पायर होती हैं, जिसको आप सुन के मूव होती हैं। कोई भी गाना।
वैसे मेरे किशोर से ज्यादा
आप किशोर जी का याद?
इतने गाने एकदम से कोई याद नहीं आता है, तय करना चाहिए, पहले लिखना चाहिए। जिंदगी के सफर में गुजर जाते हैं जो मकाम, वो फिर नहीं आते, वो फिर नहीं आते। जिंदगी के सफर, गला जरा, जिंदगी के सफर में गुजर जाते हैं जो मकाम, वो फिर नहीं आते, वो फिर नहीं आते।
Asha ji, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to do this. We have to do this for Asha Bhosle. She turns 90 on the 8th of September. Can we all sing a very happy birthday to her in advance? Ladies and gentlemen, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear